Welcome to the Rankings Podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Chris Schreier here, president and founder of Rankings.io. You're listening to the Rankings Podcast, where I feature top business owners, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys. Speaking of elite attorneys, I have Bisnar Chase, the managing partner and senior trial attorney of Bisnar Chase, on the show today. Brian was named 2020 Litigator of the Year and 2019 Lawyer of the Year and holds dozens of other top-rated honors. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you on the show, Brian. So, take me back to the beginning of Bisnar Chase. What was it like for you and John in those early days?
Oh, man, it was funny. Well, it wasn't funny. It was scary and fun. But, it was just John and I and a couple of employees. Sometimes we'd be in a situation to where, if we didn't get a settlement check in, we weren't going to make payroll. I'm proud to say we have never missed a payroll, and those days are behind us. But, early on, we were scratching, trying to grow. And as most entrepreneurs know, that when you're starting a business, banks won't give you a credit line, right? So, now when you don't need money, they give you money. But back in those days, John and I had, a bunch of credit cards, with $5,000 limits on them, $10,000 limits on them, and we had about 10 each. And that was our credit line until, the business finally grew to a point where a bank would loan us money to help us to continue the growth and be where we are today.
Yeah. So, so you bootstrapped and you're hustling and probably the 9 to 5 didn't apply. You're probably one of those first in, first out. What was it like? What was the turning point? What was the turning point that kind of took you to the next level there?
It's in the personal injury business, there are various things that are kind of landmark things that put you on the map, so to speak, and then you start getting more referrals. Everybody can market to get cases. And that's very important. But, a really good way is once you've established yourself, you get attorney referrals. And that's a whole nother, huge book of business. So, there are a handful of turning points. First, when you get your first 7-figure verdict, that's a big deal. Your first 8-figure verdict, that becomes a big deal. And you market that, obviously. People learn about that. If you get a niche and specialize in something like I do with the auto defects, it became a book of business that a lot of people don't want to do because those cases are so expensive. So, verdicts, numbers, getting your name out there. I got to argue with the California Supreme Court and got a published opinion. So there were little things like that along the way, along with Trial Lawyer of the Year awards, that just slowly but surely allow you to get more business and allow you to grow your business. And, there wasn't like one silver bullet, but just a lot of little things like that.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I want to mention is, if an attorney doesn't know you and they need to refer an out-of-state case, they're going to type in, best attorney, best, they're looking for the attorneys that can get maximum value, these litigator awards. And so your website, bestattorney.com, that fits in line with the referral strategy too, and your reputation. So I really applaud you because that's a really, you normally don't see those superlatives used in like a website name, right?
Yeah, I've got to give my partner credit for that, and he's retired now and living Maui and enjoying the good life. I'm not built for retirement, so I'm going to be doing this until I'm 100. But that was his idea. I got to tell you, back in the late 90s, you had some yellow page ads, and that was even kind of frowned upon as unprofessional. But that was really the extent. There wasn't a big internet presence. And my partner came to me, and I think it was 98, 99, and he says, Brian, we need a website. And I thought, a website? Our clients don't even have computers. Why do we need a website? And anyway, he really pushed on it, and that was, back in the late 90s. And then he came up with this idea, bestattorney.com, because there was no one with websites or law firms with websites back in those days. So it was an easy thing to get. Frankly, I thought it was cheesy. I look back on it now and I realize he was brilliant, way ahead of his time. And thank goodness he didn't listen to me.
Well, I couldn't agree more, right? Well, not only is the domain name brilliant, but a lot of times there's regulations and stuff like by calling yourself best attorney, but you kind of naturally rank for some of those in the search engine because it has it in the domain name. You know, let's talk about one of the things you mentioned that I just loved was, hey, not only are you a personal injury lawyer, you are an auto defect specialist. Like you have a niche within a niche. So let's talk about that. How did you get into that niche?
You know, it's in part luck, but I was very motivated as a young lawyer. But before I was in law school, I remember the Ford Pinto cases where people were, getting blown up and burned. And there were some internal documents that showed that Ford was calculating they can fix a Pinto for $5 a car. And so they did the math on that. And then they also did the math on what are they going to pay out and, burn victims and dead people, et cetera. And it was cheaper to pay off plaintiffs in lawsuits rather than fix the car and expose people to that. So that always struck a nerve with me. And I was I was high school back in those days. And as I was growing up, I was always kind of envious of doctors that, how they save lives. And I was really motivated to have my life's work matter to people. And I didn't want to be a doctor, but I wanted to be a lawyer. And that Ford Pinto litigation and with my desire to want to help people sort of pushed me or drove me in the direction of, the David and Goliath, corporate America, little guy versus the corporation type cases. And because probably it was Grimshaw versus Ford a long time ago, I think it was 1978, that case, planted a seed to go after the auto industry and see what they do. And been doing it for almost 30 years, and I have uncovered a lot of documents, a lot of information where that kind of stuff still goes on. So it really drives me. It's my passion when I've got a family come in and they've lost a loved one or someone's in a wheelchair, and I realize that for $10, $5, $50, that would not have had to have happened. I mean, that really motivates me to get up early in the morning and go fight for somebody. And I just get such a satisfaction out of helping people. That's my way of trying to give back and having my life's work matter.
Yeah. And I love that. That really, when you have a passion too, it drives you to learn everything you can about it in terms of expertise. And you've had, numerous victories for your clients in that regard. And so then you came about and you authored the book, Still Unsafe at Any Speed, dealing with the auto industry and defective vehicles. And then you have the recent update, The Second Collision. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so, Unsafe at Any Speed, what sort of prompted that was a couple things. One is Ralph Nader did a book, I believe it was in the 60s, called Unsafe at Any Speed. And it was about, the auto industry and defects, et cetera. And so I wanted to get his permission to do Still Unsafe at Any Speed because I thought it was a great title just to kind of 30 years later or 40 years later jump off and take off where he left off. And one of the motivators was I get calls from clients will come in and meet with me, and they had their case rejected by another attorney, and the attorney told them they didn't have a case. Or lawyers will get a hold of me after I give a program on how to identify auto defect cases. And they're like, oh, I had that case and I didn't even know I had that case. And I ended up settling the case for $15,000 when it was a multi-million-dollar case against the auto industry. So I saw all these cases getting missed. And it frustrated me because people were not identifying the cases. So one of the driving forces for the Still Unsafe at Any Speed is to walk people through with a real life story of a plaintiff to make it an interesting read, but also a checklist on what to look for so you don't miss these cases. Because I was just, it was breaking my heart hearing people getting, no compensation for a very serious injury when they should have been compensated, or they came to me luckily and the case was still viable, and they were told that they didn't have a case by another lawyer or by another 3 or 4 lawyers, and I ended up getting millions and millions of dollars. So that was the driving force, was really to educate attorneys on how to identify these kinds of cases.
Yeah, I love that. So, what was the second edition, the second collision? What was the update, the addition to the book?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do, Still Unsafe at Any Speed, I probably wrote about 10 years ago, I think, maybe 11. And so just a lot has happened since then on one hand, and on the other hand, a lot hasn't happened. But I wanted to update it because there have been some changes. One is various changes, but just for an example, I got a big verdict in a seat back case against a seat supplier and an auto manufacturer, and the auto industry took it up on appeal. We prevailed on appeal and got a fantastic published opinion that really clarified the law in California to make these cases significantly easier, and the auto industry hated that. So I had to update the book in part on, new law. So there's new strategies now on how to try these cases. So the new book talks about, in addition to newer updates on what the defects are, some have been fixed a little bit, some haven't, some are just as bad as they've ever been. I want to talk about that. But there's changes in the law. And when I got that opinion, I thought, man, that can apply to any products liability case, not just auto defects. And so the second book also has sort of a how-to trial strategy, what my thought process is when I try these types of cases. And then some other examples, like we've got the VW admission scandal, the General Motors ignition scandal. There's the Takata airbags. There's been a lot happening in the last 10, 12 years. So it was an update, but also sort of more about strategy as opposed to just how to identify the case.
So would you say, it's like the Pareto principle, the 80-20, is it like kind of end to end, what to look for, the checklist, and then like the strategies?
Yeah, it is. Because there is I remember, in a nutshell, that's exactly what it is. So I still let people know what to look for, but the strategy piece, people will bring me in to try a case with them, oftentimes, and I'll start talking about my strategy. And the initial thought sometimes is, well, we can't do that. And I go, no, well, yes, we can. And, I've got a published opinion proving we can do it. And it just simplifies the cases so much. And a lot of people still don't know that. So I really wanted to get the word out that, these are easier cases to try now than they were in the past, even though they're still, very expensive and very difficult. But I wanted people to know how I was thinking about it, because there's not a lot of people that do this kind of work, at least at the level or the volume that I do. There's a handful in the country, but most people don't do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that'd be a great resource. So you have a tremendous amount of awards and accomplishments, and you're the author of the book, and it takes dedication, this compounding, just over and over, relentless pursuit to continuously improve. And I see that in the business, and I see it in your expertise. So if I had to ask you, what are some favorite, books or mentors that come to mind in regards to your growth?
Oh, well, that's great. Yeah, I've always looked, there's a few different categories. One is I'm inspired by, my mentors from afar, people I didn't necessarily know. Some of them I do, but, great trial lawyers from around the country. And, and some of them many of them are deceased now, but biographies on them. There's, a biography on Melvin Belli. I love that book. He was, the king of torts back in the old days. There's a gentleman by the name of Ron Motley. He is since deceased. And he started the tobacco litigation, and it's because he learned a lot about lungs and cancer from asbestos litigation. So it talks about how he started his law firm and had to mortgage his house to make payroll and to finance his growth. So autobiographies from these great lawyers really inspire me and motivate me. And so when you find your back against the wall, you can think, well, so did they, and now we don't. So those types of books I love. Jack Welch, I love business management books. He wrote a book, I forgot the name of it, Winning, I think.
I think I've read that book. I love Jack, Six Sigma. And just his approach to business. Love that book.
Yeah, so I love, because even though I'm a trial lawyer and that's what I do, I'm a businessman and an entrepreneur too. So I like to read business management books just to, learn about that, because that's not really my background. I'm trained as a lawyer. I don't have an MBA, and I didn't take a lot of business classes on management. So those types of books. And then lastly, I like, what's that book, Think and Grow Rich? You ever, that old book written in the 20s or 30s? I don't know if you ever heard that.
Napoleon Hill? I think so.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill. I mean, I love Napoleon Hill books, Zig Ziglar books, those kind of, you can call them positive thinking books or whatever you want to call them. But, I love, so those are the kind of the three things, I read about my idols and the biographies, read about successful business people, and then, the positive thinking books, for lack of a better word, really inspire me and motivate me.
I love that. I haven't read any of Zig's books, but I just started reading Jim Rome, and I read his 12 Pillars of Success book. Oh, I was just blown away by that book. And so, yeah, I love several of those books. I haven't read the I'm not an attorney. I haven't read the attorney books, but we'll definitely list all of those. So, you talked, you own a business. You're an entrepreneur. You want to succeed. You want to win. So okay, we're all limited with time, right? There's only so much time in a day, and we have to utilize that to the best of our abilities. What's your high value activities that you're kind of leaning on today? What encompasses those high value activities?
You mean with regard to how I'm,
what's the best use of your time? Yeah.
Good. So I really stumbled onto this by accident, and it's turned out to be, I should probably write a book on this. Most lawyers, that is such a great question, Chris. Most attorneys have their own caseload, and that's what they do. So normally in a law firm, I'd have my cases, a partner would have their cases, other lawyers would have their cases. But if I'm doing the day-to-day work on an individual case, that's not the best use of my time. And the way it works now in my firm, and again, it was inadvertent how we ended up here, but it's turned out to be great, so I can maximize my time. I don't have, an individual caseload. I've got associates and partners that have the caseload, and they do the day-to-day work, because the day-to-day work is not the best use of my time. So I can be out speaking publicly, educating lawyers on the kinds of cases that I look for, that they can look for to help them, help me grow our businesses. I travel around the country and do things like that. I've been on various political organizations, I'm past president of the Consumer Attorneys of California. Those things getting me out there in public to generate business and also give back to the community is the best use of my time. Now, what I do, it's not that I don't work on any cases. I meet with every lawyer in the office every week, and we go through, we call them a litigation review, and we go through their cases. And we'll come up with a to-do list. And, one, did you get done last week what we said we should get done? And going forward, let's get this done, let's get that done. So I'm managing the cases, but that has me in the office one day a week doing that. That gives me 4 days a week to be out and about, growing the firm and make sure that, we're around another 20 years. And it kind of stumbled into doing it that way. But, most lawyers work on their own cases, and I don't. And it's allowed me to grow the practice, frankly.
Well, that's just brilliant, right? So you've got your meeting cadence where you're doing the bird's eye view, and a lot of it. So someone with your experience, there are other attorneys that can understand a case or read the definition, but you can view things in a different light. It's like a cohesive picture that comes with years of experience. So that is an amazing use of your time, because you can help all of the attorneys under you. And I like that Scrum question too. That's great. What bottlenecks do you have? What are you working on? What's coming up? It's kind of a Scrum approach, it's I love that. So yeah, all of this has made you successful. So, in terms of growing, you've got this continuous drive to improve. Can you look back, and I don't want to end on a negative here, but can you look back and say, that was a learning experience. That was something that I had to overcome. Is there any pitfalls that you can come to mind?
Yeah, a lot of them, and still experience pitfalls. Fortunately, none catastrophic, but just, or maybe I put them out of my mind. But yeah, as I'm growing the practice, some of the things that we did wrong early on would be, hiring staff. And if it wasn't working out, and kind of got this from Jack Welch's book, although I figured it out before I read the book. But his book, Winning, talks about having superstar employees. And if you don't have superstars, you don't have a bunch of A's or B's that can become A's, your business will not flourish to the extent it could. And oftentimes, not always, and Welch talks about this and probably more articulately than I am, but you're not necessarily and oftentimes never going to make a C and A. And what my partner and I did early on, 25 years ago and 15 years ago, we would hire people, and they were good, hardworking folks, and you just knew they didn't have the talent. They weren't bad. They were a solid C, maybe a C plus, but they were never going to be an A. But, I just felt, I liked them. And so we would always try to help people grow and sometimes keep people around for 5 years and then finally realize, this isn't working. And so, it sounds kind of cold. And I think Jack Welch got pummeled in the press in his book when he talked about, categorizing people that way. But if you're going to run a business, you need to have superstars on your team. And so what we have learned is, and I'm going to make this a positive, not a negative in a minute, is what I've learned is, hire people, but if they're not cutting it, get rid of them sooner rather than later. You're going to know within a few months or 6 months whether that C is going to be an A. It doesn't take 5 years. And so we wasted a lot of time trying to help people grow into something that they were never going to grow into. And so that was bad for my business. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm harsh on these people that we ended up firing, because I could tell you one kid, I had to fire him. This is 20 years ago. And it was terrible. It bothered me. It hurt me. But the kid just wasn't cut. He was begging for his job. And I felt really bad about it. Well, about 5 years later, I was at the airport. And he bumps into me. And he goes, "Hey, Brian, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Rick, what's going on? What's going on with you?" And he goes, "I want to thank you for firing me 5 years ago. I wasn't cut out to be a paralegal in your law firm. I now have my own business. I'm an entrepreneur." And he was flourishing. So,
wow.
I'm getting goosebumps right now telling that story. So, it sounds harsh. Can't make a CNA, fire them. But, if someone doesn't fit, everybody is an A at something, though. We all are an A at something. You're an A at what you do. I'm an A at what I do. If I had to do something that I'm telling somebody's a C at, whatever they're an A at, I'm probably a C at. So, it's not as cruel as it sounds. If you're going to run your business, you need A's. And those people that aren't A's, they need to find out what they are an A at so they can flourish at whatever, the universe has in store for them. So
I love that. There's so many nuggets in there. I mean, the longer that you keep someone, it's the harder it gets to let them go. So, when you find out it's just such a big learning lesson. You take action quickly. And again, like you said, everyone's an A at something. They have a passion about something. You wouldn't take, a point guard and put them in the center position or a catcher in the field. But, so, and then they may be, an A in one role and you move them to a manager position. I think we've all been to this where you got your doers and your delegators, and those are challenges there too.
Yeah, and that has happened. We've had people in the firm that appeared to be C's and then shifted them around to some other position and found out, you know what? They're an A here. I didn't even see that happening. So,
wow.
It's just, I think if you run any business, you just, have to, that Jack Welch book is really good on this topic. Just, you got to make sure you have your superstars. And if people can't be, yeah. Well, thanks. That was kind of a long-winded answer. I apologize.
Oh, I love that, because the superstars elevate the rest of the team too, right? So you don't want to see new people. So let's talk about, so very successful firm, but, tons of accomplishments. Let's talk about, daily rituals. Are there things that you do that kind of get you in the mindset? Because, I mean, you're hungry. I can hear it from you. You're still hungry. You're still looking to dominate. Like, what are some of those that keep you?
Yeah. So, what I try to do is I like to get up early. I love to sleep, but when I'm up early and it's dark, it's a nice quiet time. So, I'll read, some of those books I'm talking about, even if it's a few pages, or a chapter. Something I'll read that will motivate me or inspire me for the day. So I like to do that. And then I'll do emails and work for an hour or so after I've done that to get motivated. And then I try to get to the gym and, stay in shape. And it's just, if I work out, I have a better mental attitude. So really my mornings are reading something motivational to have me go have a really kick-ass day, get a little bit of work done, and then go to the gym, work out, and then, get into the office.
Awesome. So, one final question here. What questions or stories did we not talk about that you think would be important for our audience? Oh,
wow. That's a great question. And I really think it sounds simplistic, but I know that there are people that are dreamers and they're doers. And, if you just sit around dreaming about it, whatever it is, any kind of business, you're not going to get it done. And what I'm going to say is kind of common sense and in every book written. But if anybody has something that they are very passionate about doing, whatever it is, don't sit around and dream about it and say, tomorrow I'm going to take this action, because tomorrow becomes a year and then, your life's over. So just like everybody tells you, if you want to do something, you're passionate about it, have a daily goal on what you're going to accomplish that day. Have a weekly goal, a monthly goal, a 6-month goal, and make sure you do those action items. Kind of Tony Robbins talks about that, right? On having an action item or whatever. It's so easy to say, but so many people don't do it. There are so many people with dreams and hopes and desires and a belief they're going to accomplish something, but they're taking no action on a daily basis to make sure that they accomplish what it is they want to accomplish. And, even now, I've been doing this almost 30 years. I've got 10 and 15 year goals way down the road. I'm going to be an old guy, and I'm still planning for things that far out, let alone things I'm going to work on today. So just whatever you're passionate about, see what it looks like on paper, and then take action daily to make it happen. I think it's just that simple. It's that hard and that simple.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Guys, we've been talking to Brian Chase, author of Still Unsafe at Any Speed and 2020 Litigator of the Year. Brian, where can the audience get the book and learn more about you?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it may be on Amazon, but I'll tell you what, if anybody wants to reach out to my office, you can give us a call at 949-752-2999. Just tell the receptionist that you heard this podcast and you'd like a copy of both books, and we'll give them to you for free. We'll ship them out to wherever you are if you'd like to have a read.
Wow, that's very generous. Thanks, Brian.
Chris, thank you for having me on. This was great. You did an awesome job.
Thanks for listening to the Rankings Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.